Good morning. I'm Mary Thompson, research historian at Mount Vernon's Fred W. Smith Library for the Study of George Washington. I've written a book about George Washington's religious beliefs and practices, including his membership at Pohick Church, called In the Hands of a Good Providence. I also authored a book about the enslaved peoples of Mount Vernon, the only unavoidable subject of regret. This subject of regret refers to George Washington's thoughts regarding the enslaved people who worked for him at Mount Vernon. Although there is no concrete evidence that General Washington's enslaved workers helped build Pohick Church, we do know that he and other local planters were members of the Vestry and Building Committee who designed and oversaw the construction of the building. With that in mind, it's likely that some enslaved people did help build Pohick Church. The church expresses its profound gratitude to any enslaved people who did help build this 1774 Georgian structure, brick by handmade brick. Along with George Washington, Pohick also expresses heartfelt regret and sorrow for the institution of slavery. Pohick Church was originally part of the Church of England. In pre-Revolutionary War days, the Church of England considered all residents who lived within a parish's boundaries as parishioners to be baptized and educated as Christians. Therefore, colonial churches in America were encouraged to baptize and provide a Christian education for all residents within the parish, including enslaved people. For example, in 1749, Reverend Charles Green, then the rector at Pohick, noted on an official document that the country-born, meaning American-born Negroes, are chiefly baptized. In 1801, Pohick's congregation was reported to be half white and half black. One worshiper at that time, John Davis, described the parish life of Pohick. Of the congregation, Davis records that, quote, one half was composed of white people and the other of Negroes. End quote. It is now thought that those in the second group may have included many former slaves freed by Martha Washington on January 1st of that same year. Sermons given by Church of England clergy sometimes pleaded for the baptisms and religious education of African Americans. Some slave owners felt it was their Christian duty to have their slaves baptized and educated in the church, and would encourage them to attend church regularly. However, the planter society in general was more concerned about uprisings and often discouraged their gathering in large numbers to attend services. Slave uprisings were dealt with harshly, and their leaders were often whipped or hung. At the same time, the ringleaders were usually able men and valuable property, so it was important to the planter society to maintain an attitude of subservience and to avoid aspirations of freedom or equality among the slaves. Some colonial churches were built with benches against the rear wall or galleries for slaves to attend services. There is no 18th century evidence that either benches or a gallery for slaves was ever built inside Pohick Church. We do know that former slaves freed by the Washington family and their descendants settled in and around the nearby community of Gum Springs. Some attended Pohick Church in the years that followed. It is reported that in the early 1800s, the parish population of Pohick Church was nearly half African American. At the northeast corner of the church, there is a small stone marking the grave of Thomas Bushrod, who descended from two important Virginia families, the Fitzhughs and the Lees, and had probably belonged to the maternal grandfather of Supreme Court Justice Bushrod Washington, who inherited Mount Vernon following Martha Washington's death in 1802. At the time of his own death in the early 20th century, Thomas Bushrod lived across the street from Pohick Church on Richmond Highway. Mr. Bushrod was a beloved and respected sexton or groundskeeper at Pohick Church, as well as a guard at George Washington's Mount Vernon tomb. In 1955, longtime Pohick vestryman Mr. Nevitt offered a memorial to Thomas Bushrod. He explained that Mr. Bushrod was the descendant of a slave freed by the Washington family. Mr. Nevitt wrote that his own grandfather and his sons had fought in the Southern Army during the Civil War. leaving his grandmother and her 2 daughters without protection or support. Nevitt reported that Uncle Tom Bushrod came to their rescue, including them in his family. Bushrod also used his small support that the Union gave to free African Americans to care for the Nevitt family. Today, several African American individuals and families are members of Pohick Church and participate there in leadership and service. As an historian of the progressive and religious-minded General Washington, I suspect that he would be delighted at the integration and work of racial reconciliation in his beloved church.